Hey, second graders, Mrs. Cole here. So today we are going to talk about material and kind of just looking forward to the future. So in this lesson of mystery science, you guys are going to learn how new materials are invented. And in the activity specifically, bouncy glass inventions, you're going to come up with ideas for inventions that use exciting futuristic material, glass that bounces and stretches like rubber. So let's go ahead and let's start watching the mystery science video, and then we'll get back together and we'll begin on the activity itself.
Hi, it's Doug. In the last few mysteries, you've been learning about the different properties that materials have. But who comes up with materials? How do new materials get invented? Well, to give you a sense of this, let me tell you a true story about one material invention. This is a story about a scientist who worked at one of the greatest material invention laboratories in the world. It's a company called 3M. The scientists who work here have invented a lot of materials you know, some of which might even be sitting there in the room with you, like this one, Scotch tape. One of the 3M company's specialties, one of the things that they're best at, is making what we call adhesives or sticky materials. It was in the 1960s that a scientist named Dr. Spencer Silver was attempting to make a stronger, super sticky kind of glue. But as he worked on this, he failed, and the glue he made was instead only sort of sticky. Now, for most people, it would have been tempting to throw your failed experiment into the garbage can and just call it a mistake. But that's not what this scientist did. Instead, Dr. Silver didn't give up on it right away. He played around with it a bit, and he noticed something interesting. Even though it would just kind of stick to one thing and not stick strongly, when he peeled it off, it was still kind of sticky. It kept its stickiness, even if it wasn't super strong. He found this unusual and interesting, so he showed it to other people in his laboratory. No one really knew what to do with it, and most people in the lab didn't care to think about it much more. Yet Dr. Silver felt sure there was some kind of problem that this sort of sticky glue could solve, even if no one could think of any ideas. Luckily, one day he found at least one scientist in the lab who agreed that he was onto something, and it was this guy. His name was Art Fry. "Let me borrow some of that stuff," he said. "I'll see if it gives me any ideas." Now, one thing you need to know about Art is that he had a hobby on the side. He loved to sing in a choir on the weekends. He and the choir would have songbooks in front of them to help them remember the words to sing, and they'd quickly switch between songs. So Art would use little pieces of paper as bookmarks to mark each song. But see, the bookmarks were always falling out. That's when Art had that classic moment for any great inventor. "Aha," he said. In that moment of inspiration, he realized that by putting some of the kind of sticky glue on the back of the paper, he could stick the bookmarks onto the page without permanently gluing them down. And since this kind of sticky glue would stay sticky over and over, he could just keep taking these bookmarks off and reapplying them as much as he wanted. Can you guess what this invention became? When Art took the idea back to the lab at 3M, they decided to try it out on some paper. But of all the different color papers they usually had available, that day there was only yellow paper left. And so these became the famous little yellow pads of paper with kind of sticky glue on the back. They called them Post-it notes. Post-it notes went on to become one of the most popular items in any office or school. Today, they sell them in lots of different colors. So that's the story of one famous material and how it got invented.
Okay, so imagine you were a scientist who got to make new materials. What would you try to invent? Talk to somebody near you or jot it down on a piece of paper, or talk about it with a stuffed animal or a sibling or a parent, or just think about it and continue on. If you were a scientist who got to make new materials, what would you try to invent? All right, let's keep on listening.
So the invention of a new material, a glue that had the property of just being sort of sticky, made it possible to solve a problem no one had even thought to solve before. Post-it notes are an example of a recently invented material that you've actually seen. But now let me show you some new material inventions, some inventions you might not have seen before. Invented materials that we might use in the future, like this stuff. It looks like a sheet of glass, maybe the glass for a window or something. Now, when you think of glass, you think of its property of being see-through or transparent. But this is no ordinary glass. It's different. It's called electrochromic glass, and watch what it can do. Inside the glass is a material that can switch from being clear to white, depending on whether electricity runs through it. So all you have to do is plug this kind of glass into an electrical switch, and then you can choose when it's see-through and when it's not. Think of this.
Uh-oh, Sorry, hold on just a second.
Situations where we use ordinary glass and what you could do instead with this new electrochromic glass. Like instead of having curtains to cover your windows, you could just flip a switch and make the glass white when you want privacy. Or instead of having to cover your car windows when you park your car, you know your car gets really hot on the inside. Well, now you could just turn the windows white to keep out the hot sun. Right now, it's really expensive to make electrochromic glass, which is why you probably haven't seen it yet. But if someone figures out a way to make this more cheaply in the future, we might just use this kind of glass all the time. Here's another material we might use in the future. When you get it really cold, it has this amazing property of being able to float or hover when held near a magnet. It's a special kind of material that scientists call a superconductor. Now, just like electrochromic glass, it's really expensive to make this stuff. But you could probably come up with some ideas of awesome things we'll be able to do if scientists discover a way to make superconductors more cheaply. One example is to use it as a new type of sports equipment. Like, can you imagine skateboarding, but instead of having wheels, it hovers on the ground instead? A hoverboard. Incredibly, there are already companies working on this. Check this out. A company called Lexus has made one of the very first hoverboards, which they showed off in this commercial using trained professional skateboarders. You can see it's pretty hard to maneuver. This is a skate park that has magnets underneath the concrete so that this new hoverboard can actually be used. Look at that, hovering. I thought you might want to see a little bit more from this commercial, so I'll show you another clip.
That's pretty cool. It's like a real hoverboard. Wow, look at that.
Isn't it fun to think about what new materials might make possible? What problems will they solve? What kinds of new tools and devices will we create using newly invented materials? Whether it's windows that can turn on or off, or skateboards that can hover. Or maybe you can think of some ideas. What would you do with materials like these?
Okay, so what kinds of things would you want to invent with materials like these? So taking into account what we just learned about this glass, where if you put the two ends together, or if it has electricity running through it, it turns white. And then thinking about this other supercharged hovering material, what kinds of things would you want to invent? Jot it down, tell it to somebody near you, tell it to a stuffed animal, keep it to yourself in your head, and then click on when you're ready. All right, here we go.
In this activity, you're going to become an inventor. You'll come up with inventions that use a brand new material. Then you'll make a poster that explains how your invention will make life better or easier. Let's say that you and your class have been asked for help by her, Marcia. She's a scientist who works at Marvelous Materials Laboratory. Now, this example is imaginary, but let's say that Marcia has created a new kind of glass that's really different from the glass we use today. It's different even from electrochromic glass. Now, you know that glass has these properties. You can see through it, and it's hard and stiff. And if you drop it or you hit it, it breaks, shattering into lots of sharp pieces. But Marcia figured out a way to change glass so that it isn't hard and it doesn't break. Instead, this new kind of glass is stretchy and bouncy, like rubber. She invented rubbery glass. It still has the property of being see-through, but it also stretches out and then snaps back like a rubber band. And if you drop something made of rubbery glass, it bounces like a rubber ball. So Marcia has made this brand new material, rubbery glass, but she can't think of a cool way to use it. You and your class are going to help her. What could you invent using rubbery glass? What problems can this new material solve? To come up with ideas, let's start by thinking of all the different ways that we use regular glass today. What things are made out of regular glass? Make as long a list as you can. Your teacher will write them down on the board. We'll pause while you do that. Press play on this video when you're ready to keep going.
Okay, so I'm not actually going to write it all down. You're going to write it down wherever you are with your own pen and paper. Um, but let's just kind of talk about it. What kinds of things are made out of glass? Well, windows, cups, glasses, windshields, some light covers. There are all kinds of things made out of glass. Can you think of any more to add to the list? Go ahead and jot them down and then hit play.
How many things could you think of? Well, here's what Marcia could think of. She thought of jars that you can store things in. She thought of windows. She thought of eyeglasses, light bulbs, phones and computer screens, and car windshields. Are there any things on your list that Marcia left out? We'll pause while you check and read those out loud too.
So I'm not sure if we left anything off of our own list. In fact, I think that we forgot some of these things like cell phones, computers, TV screens, and jars. But is there anything else that you thought of? All right, let's continue on.
Now that you have your list, you're ready to think about rubbery glass. Imagine if all of these things weren't made out of normal glass. Imagine if instead they were bouncy or stretchy or both. Could being bouncy and stretchy make any of these things better than they are now? Thinking up new ideas takes practice, so let's consider the bottle first. Imagine a bottle that bounces. What ideas does that give you? Does that solve any problems? What could you use a bouncy jar for? We'll pause while your class discusses your ideas. Your teacher will write them down on the board.
Okay, so what would we use a bouncy jar for? Well, I know for me personally, I wouldn't mind a bouncy jar for when I am outside or walking around anywhere really. And, you know, sometimes you accidentally drop stuff. I think if you had a bouncy jar, that would be awesome because then it wouldn't shatter, it wouldn't break everywhere. But you as a kid, what would you use a bouncy jar for? Okay, let's continue on.
Now imagine a bottle that could stretch into all sorts of different shapes, like these. What could you use a stretchy jar for? We'll pause again while your class discusses your ideas and your teacher writes them down on the board.
Okay, what would we use a stretchy jar for? I think for me, it would be awesome if I had a stretchy jar because then I could have one jar that I could fill with anything. So I wouldn't have to buy a lot of jars. And if you don't have to buy a lot of jars, then that saves you money. And also you're cutting down on the waste that we're putting in to the planet. Like we're recycling really, really well. Another awesome use is to make sure, or it would be for it to help fit it into spots that are kind of tight, or if there's not enough room in the cupboard for something. I don't know. Those are just some of the thoughts right off the top of Mrs. Cole's head, as you can tell from my stammering. What kind of thoughts do you have? Go ahead and jot them down, share them, keep them in your head if you'd like, and go ahead and hit play when you're ready.
Now your class is going to go through the rest on your own. What ideas do you have about the other objects on your list? Imagine all of these things being bouncy and stretchy. Does it give you any ideas? We'll pause now so you can come up with ideas and your teacher can write them on the board.
Okay, bouncy and stretchy. What would we want a bouncy window for, or a stretchy window? Well, I know that as a little kid, I would always throw the ball on the wall at the house or at school, and sometimes you hit the windows. So if it was a bouncy or a stretchy window, then the ball wouldn't break it. In fact, the ball would either bounce off or it would maybe stretch the glass back and then maybe it just falls back down onto the floor, or maybe it launches it. Who knows how far? Bouncy and stretchy eyeglasses. Obviously, that would be fantastic because then your lenses wouldn't break, they wouldn't get scratched. Same thing with light bulbs and phones and windshields for your car. What other good uses would there be for bouncy and stretchy glass? Jot them down, share them, keep them to yourself, but think about it for a moment and then hit play.
I'm guessing you have lots of ideas by now. Marcia is thrilled you guys came up with so many things. Maybe you thought about how a rubbery glass water bottle would stretch like a water balloon to hold lots and lots of water. At Mystery Science, We know that birds sometimes fly into windows. With normal glass, they'd hurt themselves because the glass is hard. But with rubbery glass, the bird would bounce off without getting hurt. We also thought it would be great to have a smartphone with a rubbery glass screen. That way, if we dropped the phone, it would bounce instead of breaking. Or if we wanted a bigger screen, we could stretch it and make it bigger. Now it's time to decide on the idea you like best. It can be any idea that Marcia or your class came up with. You will turn the idea into an invention and create a poster about it. Your teacher will hand out invention sheets that you'll use to make your poster. We'll pause while your teacher hands those out.
Okay, so these invention sheets, where am I? There we go. I'm not going to hand out. They are already in your possession. So in your Mystery Science Journal Material Magic book, if you go to the back, it's not the first last page, it's the second last page. So it's the second to last page in your pocket, and it looks just like the one on the screen.
Now that you have your sheet, you need to come up with a name for your invention. Our favorite idea was the stretchy window that saved birds, and we're calling it the bird bouncer. You also need to write a reason that people want your invention. People want the bird bouncer because it saves the birds. At the bottom, you'll draw a picture of your invention, and then you'll decide how much it costs and write the price right here. Good luck inventing.
All right. So I would love it, and so would your other teachers. Hold on just a moment. Let me get this off of the screen. Okay, so the other second grade teachers and I would love it if you filled this out and came up with your own invention for bouncy, stretchy glass. Any of the ideas that I gave you, or any of the ideas that you got from the Mystery Science video, or any ideas that you thought of yourself would be fantastic for you to use. So remember, you're putting down the name of the invention here, and you're explaining why it makes life better. So that's the whole point of an invention. It's supposed to make something better and easier. If your invention's too complicated, or if it doesn't make sense, nobody's really going to want to use it. And then that would be a failed invention. But you guys will come up with an idea as to why your invention makes life better for you or for your parents or for anybody, for animals, for sea creatures, for insects, whatever. How does it make life better? And then show us a picture and tell us how much it costs. Once you've finished with that, go ahead and have your parents help you take a picture of it and send it in to your teacher so that we can take a look at your guys' inventions and possibly have a discussion about it the next time we meet up. All right, second graders, it's been awesome working with you, and I cannot wait to see some of those inventions that you come up with. Bye. Have a great day.